Fravor saw it firsthand during a training mission, describing it like a 40-foot-long tic-tac, maneuvering rapidly and changing direction. The object was first sighted in 2004, then similar objects again in 2015.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at this thing! It's rotating.
Amici della Sentinel, recentemente è accaduto un fatto molto importante per chi si interessa di ufologia, ma per chi si interessa anche dei misteri in generale. È accaduto che il 26 luglio l'ufficiale dell'aeronautica degli Stati Uniti ed ex funzionario dell'intelligence David Grusch e gli ex piloti della Marina degli Stati Uniti Ryan Graves e David Fravor testimoniano davanti alla sottocommissione della Camera degli Stati Uniti per la sicurezza nazionale, nell'udienza intitolata Fenomeni anomali non identificati, implicazioni sulla sicurezza nazionale, la sicurezza pubblica e la trasparenza del governo. Ora, questo è un fatto molto importante perché i tre testimoni sono stati proprio all'interno di un contesto governativo sotto giuramento e questo è un fatto estremamente importante. Sappiamo bene che qualsiasi testimonianza sotto giuramento è passibile di punizioni penali anche gravi. Perciò tutto ciò che viene detto in quel contesto viene attentamente esaminato per la buona fede assoluta dei testimoni. Ho cercato di estrapolare nel video le parti più salienti, le parti più importanti della testimonianza in riferimento alle domande che via via la commissione faceva ai testimoni. Più che altro David Grusch è dedicato proprio questa parte del video, indubbiamente l'indagine, la commissione è durata più di 2 ore, non si poteva certo mettere 2 ore di video, sono all'incirca 40 minuti che ho cercato di fare in modo di poterlo anche tradurre in italiano. Scusate se la traduzione in alcuni punti non può essere fedele perché ho usato un traduttore automatico, pertanto in riferimento a questo ci sono alcuni punti che nella lettura potrebbero anche risultare un po' incoerenti, ma l'importante è che si capisca il contesto bene della risposta e il significato che ne voleva dare il testimone David Grusch. Perciò in riferimento a questa testimonianza vi invito a fare le vostre riflessioni, i vostri ragionamenti, invito come sempre a lasciare un commento e se il video vi è piaciuto a lasciare un like e non dimenticate di iscrivervi al canale. Ora vi lascio il video, seguitelo attentamente e fate i vostri ragionamenti.
Signor Presidente, onorevoli colleghi e membri del Congresso, vi ringrazio, sono felice di essere qui. Si tratta di un tema importante e vi ringrazio per il vostro tempo. Mi chiamo David Charles Grusch, sono stato un ufficiale dei servizi segreti per 14 anni, sia nell'aeronautica militare degli Stati Uniti, sia nella Guardia Nazionale Aerea in servizio attivo e nella riserva, con il grado di maggiore e più recentemente, dal 2021 al 2023, presso l'Agenzia Nazionale di Intelligence Geospaziale, NGA, con il grado civile GS-15, che è l'equivalente militare di un colonnello Fulbright. Ero il corresponsabile della mia agenzia per l'analisi dei fenomeni anomali non identificati e degli oggetti transmediali, oltre a riferire alla Task Force UAP-TF e infine, una volta istituito, all'Ufficio per la risoluzione delle anomalie in tutto il dominio, ARO. Sono diventato un whistleblower grazie alla denuncia di un problema urgente del PPD-19 nel maggio del 2020. Con l'ispettore generale della comunità dell'intelligence, in seguito alle segnalazioni di diversi stimati e accreditati militari ed ex militari e membri dell'intelligence, secondo cui il governo degli Stati Uniti, militari ed ex membri dell'intelligence, che il governo degli Stati Uniti sta operando con segretezza al di sopra della supervisione del congresso. Per quanto riguarda gli UAP, la mia testimonianza si basa su informazioni che mi sono state fornite da persone con una lunga esperienza di legittimità e di servizio al Paese. Servizio al Paese, molti dei quali hanno anche condiviso prove convincenti sotto forma di fotografie, documentazione ufficiale e testimonianze orali riservate a me e ai miei colleghi. Ho fatto tutto il possibile per corroborare queste prove per un periodo di 4 anni, mentre ero nella task force UAP, e ho fatto la mia due diligence sull'individuo che le condivideva. Grazie a questi passi, credo fermamente nell'importanza di portare queste informazioni davanti a voi. Sono guidato da un impegno per la verità e la trasparenza, radicato nel nostro dovere intrinseco di sostenere la Costituzione degli Stati Uniti e di proteggere il popolo americano. Proteggere il popolo americano. Chiedo al Congresso di far rispettare al nostro governo questo standard e di indagare a fondo su queste affermazioni. Tuttavia, mentre sono qui sotto giuramento, parlo dei fatti così come mi sono stati raccontati. Nell'aeronautica militare degli Stati Uniti, nell'ambito dell'Ufficio Nazionale di Ricognizione, NRO, in qualità di riservista, sono stato membro della Task Force UAP dal 2019 al 2021. Ho prestato servizio presso il centro operativo dell'NRO nello staff del briefing del direttore, che comprendeva il coordinamento del Presidential Daily Brief e il supporto a una serie di operazioni di contingenza, di cui sono stato il capo della divisione intelligence di riserva. Nel 2019 il direttore della Task Force UAP mi chiese di identificare tutti i programmi di accesso speciale tutti i programmi ad accesso speciale e controllato, conosciuti anche come SAPS e CAPS. Dovevamo soddisfare la nostra missione prevista dal Congresso e all'epoca eravamo a diretto riporto del DepSecDef. All'epoca, a causa delle mie ampie mansioni di supporto all'intelligence a livello esecutivo, ero autorizzato ad accedere letteralmente a tutte le... e in una posizione di estrema fiducia, sia a livello militare che civile. Nel corso delle mie mansioni ufficiali sono stato informato di un programma pluridecennale di recupero e reverse engineering di crash UAP e mi è stato negato l'accesso a questi dati aggiuntivi quando l'ho richiesto. Ho deciso, sulla base dei dati raccolti, di riferire queste informazioni ai miei superiori e a diversi ispettori generali, diventando di fatto un whistleblower. Come sapete, ho subito delle ritorsioni per la mia decisione, ma spero che le mie azioni portino alla fine a un risultato positivo di maggiore trasparenza. Vi ringrazio e sarò lieto di rispondere alle vostre domande.
In your complaint to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, you claim that you believe information is being hidden. What kind of information do you think was hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs but not sharing it with intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information. Yeah.
Mr. Grusch, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions are important questions, and I look forward to being involved in the process to get those answered. I know there'll be a lot of questions from other committee members, so I yield back.
Mr. Grusch, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you all very much. Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, as they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would that you know of? or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
Mr. Grusch, what about you? What was your experience after you came forward?
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Okay. Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people.
Mr. Grusch, in speaking to you yesterday, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Aero, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over Aero in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of Aero.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that though mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you. So it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail.
Mr. Grusch, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grusch, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's, some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs. So I'll use Title 10, so DOD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight of SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the Gang of Eight is at least supposed to be notified if a waived or bigoted unacknowledged SAP is created, and that's public law.
Well, so that how does, I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
Does that mean
self-fund.
that there is money in the budget that is set to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Okay. Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grusch, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you've spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Okay. I'll yield the balance of my time back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Grusch, in your sworn testimony, you state that the United States government has retrieved supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft and other UAP-related artifacts. You go so far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. Several other former military and intelligence officials have come forward with similar allegations, albeit in non-public settings. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to AARO thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to AARO that I also interviewed,
Okay.
and I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay.
I was able to evaluate
Okay,
that information.
I need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is accurate, came from a direct quote. And this contradiction is a perfect example of why we need to inject transparency into our government. And for another example, look no further than the pitiful response to the Chinese spy balloon debacle earlier this year. You may remember the mass confusion that ensued when the balloon was first spotted over Montana, 4 days after it first entered U.S. airspace over Alaska. The Biden administration's initial inability to address the object grew into a continuous series of embarrassments. After news of the balloon reached the mainstream media, we were assured that the balloon posed no threat to our security. However, after the balloon was allowed to transit the entire continental United States, fighter jets were scrambled off the coast of South Carolina to shoot it down. This flip-flopping and obfuscation caused needless confusion, fear, and panic across the country. It's my hope, Mr. Chairman, that this sort of confusion will not be repeated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct this, I believe, to Mr. Grusch, but if any of you all feel like you need to jump in, just jump right in. We're good. Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of this crash retrieval, some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. As soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right. When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because of sensitive.
All right. If any of y'all want to jump in on any of this, you're more than welcome to. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
Well, anybody who has...
and I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin, so please go right ahead.
Certainly difference between member access and, say, somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access adjudicative authority should be able to grant you access.
Mr. Burchett, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right, but I draw a point on that because we can have access to those programs, and so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Burchett. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this or not, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient. So who gets to decide this, in your opinion, in the past?
It's a group of career senior executive officials.
Okay, are they government officials?
Both in and out.
Do what?
Both in and out of government, and that's about as far as I can go there. Yeah.
All right, well, that leads to my next question. Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs, to your knowledge? I mean, we know we audit the Pentagon every year, and I've been here 5 years, and they failed the dadgum thing every year. They lose over $1 billion a year, we think, and I was told the Department of Defense maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means. In the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So tell me.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work the other way.
If you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay now, you get a call from the IRS. So please, what corporations?
Yeah, I don't know the specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide to the committees in specific divisions, and I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay, has there been any Has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
Thank you. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. I do concur with the ranking member as well as several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand what you're putting on the table here and what you're putting on the line here, and we thank you for that. Mr. Grusch, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answers to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field wide. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Grusch, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
So I'll just say that the information about the contractor himself were provided by a witness, and I have no particular detail in that relationship.
Mr. Grusch?
The kind of general unclassed wave tops, certainly the contractors, or the metal benders, so to speak, they're the ones actually doing specific performance on government contracts.
Are they required to issue any disclosure regarding UAP sightings, or do they engage in any reporting around this?
In terms of the contractors?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
They do not. Okay. Now, when it comes to notification that you had mentioned about IRAD programs, we have seen defense contractors abuse their contracts before through this committee. I have seen it personally, and I have also seen the notification requirements to Congress abused. I am wondering, one of the loopholes that we see in the law is that there is, at least from my vantage point, is that depending on what we're seeing, is that there are no actual definitions or requirements for notification. What methods of notification did you observe? Like when they say they notified Congress, how did they do that? Do you have insight into that?
For certain IRAD activities, I can only think of ones conventional in nature. Sometimes they flow through certain, I'll just say, SAP programs that have cognizant authority over the Air Force or something, and those are congressionally reported compartments, but IRAD is literally internal to the contractor, so as long as it's money, either profits, private investment, et cetera, they can do whatever they want.
To put a finer point on it, when there is a requirement for any agency or company to notify Congress, do they contact the chairman of a committee? Do they get them on the phone specifically? Is this through an email to hypothetically a dead email box?
A lot of it comes through what they call the PPR, Periodic Program Review process, if it's a SAP or Controlled Access Program Equity, and then those go to the specific committees, whether it be the SAS, CAS, HISI.
Thank you.
I want to get into specifics here, and the reason I'm going to go this way is because you've talked a bit about what I would call misdirection by official U.S. government with regard to UAPs, right? And so I'm going to get to that in a second, but last week White House NSC spokesman John Kirby stated that UAPs are having an impact on our training ranges and need to be treated as a legitimate issue. Do you concur with his statements? That's for each of you.
Yes.
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 Okay. Now, having said that, I'm going to take you to specific instances around the Phoenix Valley, because that's where I live. In '97, we had the famous Phoenix Light case. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There were two things that went along with that, and the explanation was military training range off Luke and the Barry Goldwater Range. Do you know anything different other than the official explanation of those lights?
Only what's in the public vernacular about it. That was outside the scope of my duties.
And if we wanted to, just my question along with my colleague from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if we wanted to find out more about that, where would we go to find the files, and who would we address? And are you going to tell me we need to go to a SCIF so you can tell us in a SCIF?
I could potentially give you a vector on that. That specific case, I'm familiar with it in terms of public, but I give you a vector in a closed environment, yeah.
That would be good, thank you. So if it's true that UAPs are having an impact on training ranges, and this administration considers it to be a legitimate issue, what steps can Congress take to address training range impacts? And I say that having two very large training ranges in my state. And so we'll start with Mr. Graves and going down the panel.
Some of the initial procedures have been implemented, such as within the United States Navy, that have a range failure report that gathers information from pilots. I understand that a service-wide reporting mechanism is still pending. However, that would be a great next step, not only for gathering information, but for showing the troops that it is an acceptable topic and reducing the stigma.
Okay, please, all of you continue.
Yeah, as a recipient of a lot of those training range reports, sometimes we only get contextual kind of oral reporting. It'd be nice if they attached all sensor data and there's a system in place that can handle multiple classifications of data. And that's an issue with the F-35, right? That jet was never built to be an ISR platform. And it's a pain in the, we'll just say butt, to get that data off, so, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with the previous two, being a user of those training ranges, that the data has to be out there. You have to acknowledge that you're seeing them, and then you have to collect the data. Right now, you get the report, someone says, I saw something, but no one collects the radar data to back it up and do research.
Okay. Do you believe that the 2019 classification guidelines for UAPs interferes with the federal government's ability to be transparent with the American people? And do you think we need to be more transparent with the American people? All of you, yeah.
I'll say yes to that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with at least the UAP Task Force 2019 Security Classification Guide. I think it's fair. I did actually help author that with the
you got a bias that way then.
But I will say, I'll call it a lazy attitude about declassifying videos. I mean, I've seen some of the videos of the recent shoot down, and I saw no reason that couldn't have been released as long as they mask some data. The American people deserve to see that imagery and full motion video.
And then we go to Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys coming out today, testifying. Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town. And so I think that's because I'm from Missouri. You've got to show me, right? With that being said, there's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grusch. And so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity...
By UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here, because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Okay. One of my constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that We are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of. So,
would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes and because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, and but the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to them it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described. So
you're not aware, it has not happened that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Grusch, a couple of questions for you too, sir, this morning. What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government, of the 5% that are reported?
I can only speak for my personal leadership over at NGA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I could triage. So,
do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in a public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ogles, for the great questions, brother. Mr. Grusch, I might have asked this before, but I want to make sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you can imagine assessing an unknown unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
How do you think we ought to handle UAP whistleblower complaints like yours in the future?
Yeah, there was some issue with mine. So, PPD-19 process, it goes to the Intel committees, either through PPD-19 or ICD-120. There's not a good way for the Intelligence Community Inspector General to provide that to other committees. And I asked my information to be sent to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee because there are Title X equities at play, but there was no smooth process to do so. Yeah.
It's a trash can. Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively punished for so. Yeah.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by News Nation, and it follows Mr. Grush's full interview for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Grusch, why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either a biological or astrophysics perspective, I just like to keep an open mind on what it could be,
Okay, and referring to your News Nation interview, you had referenced specific treaties between governments. Article 3 of the Nuclear Arms Treaty with Russia identifies UAPs. It specifically mentions them. To your knowledge, are there safety measures in place with foreign governments or other superpowers to avoid an escalatory situation in the event that a UAP malevolent event occurs?
Yeah, you're referring to actual public treaty in the UN Register. It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, the Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Outbreak of Nuclear War signed in 1971. Unclassified treaty publicly available. And if you cite the George Washington University National Security Archives, you will find the declassified in 2013 specific provisions in the specific red line flash message traffic with the specific codes pursuant to Article 3 and Article, also Situation 2, which is in the previously classified NSA archive. What I would recommend, and I tried to get access, but I got a wall of silence at the White House, was those specific incidents when those message traffic was used. I think some scholarship on that would open the door to a further investigation using those publicly available information.
Thank you. And then my last question with 51 seconds remaining. You mentioned white-collar crimes potentially being taking place in regards to a cover-up. Can you please elaborate?
I have concerns based on the interviews I conducted under my official duties of potential violations of the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I yield the remainder of my time.
Good. Mr. Grusch, you've been able to answer in great detail on certain questions, and then other things you say you're not able to respond to. Can you just explain where you're drawing the line, and what's the basis for that?
Yeah, based on my DOPSR security review and what they've determined that is unclassified.
I see. So you're answering any questions that just call upon your knowledge of unclassified questions, but anything that relates to classified matters you're not commenting on in this context.
In an open session, but happy to participate in a closed session at the right level, yeah.